Ask Reddit by 300 Teeth Gerald. Outside of 9/11, what was a major historical event that you lived through that you'll never forget where you were when it happened? Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. I recall exactly where I was at work when it was announced. I was in first grade and watched it live surrounded by 70 or so other terrified 6 and 7-year-olds. Never saw a teacher move that fast to shut a TV off. I'm from New Orleans and lived through Katrina. We still feel the ripples of it here often. A lady and her family joined our church a few years after Katrina. I remember the day when she and some other people, myself included, were getting baptized. We had one of those full immersion pools behind the pulpit. She wanted so badly to be baptized to affirm her faith, but the trauma of nearly drowning her house made her have a panic attack every time she got near the pool. Our pastor eventually pulled her away, had her do the little water on the forehead baptism you do for babies, and had to assure her that God would understand. It's still one of the most heartbreaking things I've personally seen someone go through. The Berlin Wall came down while we were stationed in Germany. I still have a piece of it. I'd got to visit Berlin about 4 years earlier on a Boy Scout trip, which was mind-blowing in itself. My dad had a friend in Berlin when the wall came down and got me a piece of it. One of my prized possessions to this day. I was in 7th grade when President Kennedy was shot. Visuals still bring back that sadness. This for me also, though I was in kindergarten. I came home and was watching TV waiting for my mother to prepare lunch when the show I was watching was interrupted to announce it. Even in low def and black and white, I could see the tears on the face of one newscaster. The OJ car chase. The Challenger explosion in 1986. OJ car chase underrated. That was mesmerizing. Fall of the Berlin Wall. I was scheduled to go on a school trip there that spring. The school cancelled it due to safety concerns, so I ended up going to Florida instead. Y2K. People were really freaking out about this. Banks put limits on how much people could withdraw from their accounts. People were demanding physical proof of investments and property ownership. 1999 was a very tumultuous year. People always say that Y2K was a bust and it was all hype. But working in it was actually a borderline miracle how the global IT infrastructure came together, identified a very real threat, saw the ramifications, and put a plan in action to prevent it, and pulled it off. It would be like the entire political world coming together to reverse global warming with a set, rapidly approaching, deadline. Columbine. Yeah, I grew up in Littleton where Columbine happened, so that one is especially memorable to me. My class was on a field trip to the state capital and we were on the bus back to our school when the bus driver was told he couldn't go back to our area. We were driving around a bit while we tried to figure out what was going on. It was 1999, so only one of the chaperones had a cell phone. When word got around there was a shooting at Columbine, it was pretty rough. We weren't in that same school district, but one of my classmates did have a sister at the school, so was understandably very freaked out. OJ putting on the gloves. I was at a restaurant with a girlfriend while the trial was being televised. The reaction from the patrons was unforgettable, a collective gasp of disbelief. For me it was the Bronco chase. I was at a friend's house killing time before going to a party. I remember being in class when he was acquitted. I was in high school in LA, and the teacher said something like, "The only color that matters here is green." After class got out, a number of the black kids were cheering. It was weird. There was a documentary about it I watched years later that helped make sense of the racial tensions in LA that I just couldn't wrap my head around at 16/17. Princess Diana's death. That video of those friends having a game night, then devolving into tears and shock on the couch, always comes to mind. I remember we were playing GoldenEye when my uncle came in and announced it. It wasn't long and he and my mom were sobbing. People who weren't alive during that time can't understand what a major pop culture figure she was and how strongly people identified with her. The people's princess, for sure. Watching the launch to the moon was my earliest memory. Reagan being shot. John Lennon shot. Challenger explosion. Columbia disaster. Waco. Oklahoma City bombing. I'm kind of surprised this is the first mention of Oklahoma City I've seen. The 20th of July, 1969. I was 7 and amp. 1/2. That half is always important at that age. We were glued to the TV set at my aunt and amp uncle's house in Crete, Nebraska, watching the Apollo 11 crew take that one giant leap. Paris attacks on the 13th of November 2015. Yup. I was in Paris that evening. I've never went home that quickly. My best friend was hiding under a table in a bar next to the Bataclan. I will definitely never forget that. Challenger disaster happened on my birthday when I was 6. We were watching it in school, and when it blew up all the teachers were crying, but the kids thought it was cool because, well, explosions. The switch from national currency in Europe to the euro. I still sometimes calculate how much the euro price would be in my former national currency. 22. July attacks in Norway. To me there was first the fear of what was actually going on. It didn't seem like anyone had hardly gotten a grasp of what was going on downtown in Oslo before the reports of shooting at Utøya. Even after they had captured the guy, and he had taken credit for it all, I had a hard time believing it was a one-man act for a good while. Then there was the fear of how our society would change. But I'm proud of how we as a society dealt with it, through unity and sadness over anger and fear. That's my biggest one as well. I was at work when I heard the first reports about gunshots at Utøya, and I assumed it was someone playing with fireworks or something. Then the numbers started coming in through the night, and that was chilling. It's an event that I'm still having a hard time coming to grips with. It just feels so unreal. The same way I feel about 9/11, really, the magnitude is just beyond my comprehension. The 22nd of May 17, the Manchester Arena bombing during Ariana Grande's concert. I didn't attend it, but I remember everything coming out on Twitter and knew people who were friends with one of the victims. It had repercussions across the UK, and I remember going to a shopping centre shortly after and seeing armed police patrolling for the first and only time in my life. Then of course Ariana did the One Love concert, and I cried watching it because of her strength to go on and the strength of Manchester and our nation as a whole. My cousins and aunt were at that concert. They are still traumatized by it today. Colombia. A girl I was living with was moving out. Her parents had come to pick her up and we were not getting along. Then the shuttle blew up and we all sat wrapped watching my shitty little TV while the news came in, our differences aside for a while. I did an overnight caving trip in Tennessee with my ROTC group. The next morning, we all crawled back out and were muddy and freezing when we stopped off at a local museum visitor center to use the bathroom. I was the first one into the building when I saw all the TVs turn to the same channel, a fiery blaze streaking across the sky. What was spooky was that I didn't see Chirins at first saying what it was, so it took a minute to find out it was the Columbia burning up on re-entry. Coincidentally, my father was on a job site in Paris, Texas at the time, which was directly in the debris field. He told me he saw a number of blacked out SUVs driving around the area. He never saw any of the debris, but a helmet fragment was found nearby eventually. COVID. This is funny, but I'll always remember when the NBA shut down. That was the oh shit moment for me. They announced they were suspending the rest of the games that night and I was getting ready to go to the airport to catch a flight. Didn't catch that flight, didn't get on another airplane for probably 8 months. Chernobyl. I was playing on the balcony in my childhood home. Mother came over and marched me inside. This was Italy by the way, but people got super scared of the fallout. I was a young teen obsessed with NASCAR, still am, but I'll never forget watching the race, accident and later the press conference when Dale Earnhardt was killed. I started following NASCAR because of his death. The media attention surrounding the event was widespread and I checked it out. Became hooked. I'll never forget the Pepsi 400 when Dale Jr. won. That's one happy memory I have. I had spent the night at a friend's house. He woke up before me, turned on the TV and woke me up when he learned that the space shuttle Columbia had broken up on re-entry. I was 16 at the time and absolutely heartbroken. I've been obsessed with space since I was a child and always looked at our astronauts as the best of the best. JFK assassination. The London bombings on 7/7, or as the Americans call them, 7/7. Thank you for including the normal date format, it's really confusing when it's backwards. IDK if it's major, but I remember waking up from a nap and learning the Queen of England had died. It was a pretty big deal, yeah. I'm in the US, but I never knew a time when Elizabeth II wasn't queen.